November is Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Month, and one group is hoping that their efforts will double the survival rate from the disease by 2020.
The Pancreatic Cancer Action Network not only offers services to patients, but also to caregivers. And joining us today, we have Kara Carlson, the media chair from the Phoenix affiliate. Welcome, Kara. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well.
Well, it's really good to have you. So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about pancreatic cancer?
Well, unfortunately, in the last 40 years, survival rate for pancreatic cancer has remained stagnant at about a 6% per 5-year survival rate. And over 75% of the people who are diagnosed within the first 6 months will pass away. So it is a very deadly disease that we are trying to make inroads against.
And so when we're saying the survival rate hasn't moved in the last 40 years and we're trying to double that survival rate, what steps do we take to make that number move?
One of the big things that Pancreatic Cancer Action Network is trying to focus on is clinical trials. Obviously, with a disease that moves so quickly, it's difficult to get people into the clinical trials that they need to get into quickly enough. So one of the programs that the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network has is called the Patient and Liaison Services, where it's a free program. Patients and caregivers can call up the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network and get a one-on-one case manager who helps them not only with getting them connected with other survivors so that they can get a message of hope, getting connected with other caregivers who can kind of understand and relate to what the caregiver is going through, but also provide the caregivers and patients with lists of questions to ask their doctor so that they can be involved in the healthcare process. Because if you get hit with any kind of cancer diagnosis, obviously that knocks the wind out of you, and it can be hard to really know what questions to ask to get the appropriate care. And finally, the really valuable program that not only helps the individual patients and their caregivers, but also is aimed at helping future pancreatic cancer survivors is the clinical trials database, where we can actually ask questions to you about your cancer, get a list of possible cancer clinical trials that you can get involved in, and then provide that to you to go talk to your doctor about which of these clinical trials would be best for you to get involved in. And particularly with pancreatic cancer, when there are so few so few approved drugs, getting you involved in a clinical trial, getting a survivor involved in a clinical trial is really important and can help improve your survival and as well provide good information for clinical researchers.
Definitely. I mean, that inspires a lot of confidence, actually, and I feel like there's always just been this big cloud around pancreatic cancer, and the Action Network seems to be this light that's sort of, making it very clear for people. One of the people in the world who was very high profile who had pancreatic cancer was Steve Jobs. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was? I mean, what was his like?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for Steve Jobs, and he had one of the smaller, there's a 5% of people who are diagnosed with pancreatic cancer had the type of pancreatic cancer that Steve Jobs had. People like my dad, he was diagnosed with adenocarcinoma. That's 95% of your pancreatic cancer patients are diagnosed with that disease, and he unfortunately passed away within 2 months. So, we're trying to change the trajectory of that disease and double survival rate from the current 6% to 12%.
And we know, is there anything that people can do? Is this something, like you said, maybe hereditary? Is this something that we can do, preventive measures that people can do in their own lives?
Well, we have, as part of the PALS program, different nutritional guidelines and things that people can get involved with. Obviously, speak to your doctor is the best way to make sure that you're doing the correct thing for your life, other than living healthy, eating right, exercising. Those are that's the typical thing. There hasn't been any single link that medical science has identified that they can point to that says this will, if you don't do this, you won't get pancreatic cancer. It's nothing that easy.
And so how can people rally together to make a difference for this?
People can get involved we have a few larger events in Phoenix. Purple Stride is coming up in March, and you can register by going to Googling Purple Stride Phoenix. That's March in 2015. The other thing that people can get involved with, actually, I went to Capitol Hill to lobby with people from all over the country for increased research funding for pancreatic cancer with a lady from Tucson in 2012. Unfortunately, she did pass away shortly thereafter from complications from pancreatic cancer, but people from Tucson do make the journey, and it's great to have them there to talk to Tucson representatives to get the message out.
And that voice to get heard.
Exactly.
So absolutely, there's different ways to get involved, and we can learn more information how you can wage hope locally at pancan.org/wage-hope, or by calling 877-272-6226. And Kara, thank you so much for the information today.
Thank you for having me.